And that's a common dilemma. People don't believe in themselves. They don't believe that they're enough. And it takes years and supportive community to overcome it.
What if story is the answer to our crises of meaning and belonging, to our impulse to heal our lives and help others, to our desire and drive to leave this world better than we found it? Now, we love good stories. In fact, we're kind of obsessed, not just with the stories themselves, but with the stories behind the stories. Their oddly perfect timing, the healing process they provoke in their authors, and their capacity to catalyze individual and collective change. And we love exploring these with writers, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, healers, parents, and others. Tune in to hear these stories behind the stories and entertain with us the real possibility that whether you are a teller or a consumer, story is always offering or leading us to an answer. After navigating the domains of education, technology, financial services, healthcare, manufacturing, business services, advertising, nonprofit organizations, and more, Renee Beth Poindexter founded Living the Potential Network. The vision to put children in the driver's seat of their learning and adults back in the driver's seat of their lives was vast and ahead of its time, and she struggled to find a way to communicate it. Tune in to find out how Renee Beth connected with every audience through one story, how she discovered which personal stories were sabotaging her efforts to change the world, and how she is now changing the world by unleashing the potential from the inside out, one life, one family, one project at a time. Grab a cup of something sweet and sip on some story and sanity with us. Welcome to Sips of Story and Sanity, where we talk about the stories behind the stories with authors, speakers, thought leaders, healers, parents, and more. My team, son Aaron, sister Alyssa, and clients turned friend turned team members, Teddy and Lori, I always get that wrong, are here to help me make sure that we get the most delicious sips of story and sanity out of this conversation. And today we have Renee Beth Poindexter with us, who is the founder of Living the Potential Network, a community that works together to create a better future by connecting individuals of all ages and backgrounds with mentors, collaborators, resources, training, and opportunities they need to unfold their unique potential. The goal is that everyone becomes and creates the change that they want to be in the world. An accomplished trainer, facilitator, coach, and consultant, Renee Beth's experience spans the industries of technology, financial services, healthcare, manufacturing, business services, advertising, and nonprofit organizations, providing her a broad scope for designing innovative solutions for social change. Welcome, Renee Beth.
Wow, thanks for that wonderful introduction. It sounds like I must be at least 150 years old.
At least.
I know. It's like, really? I'm exhausted already.
I don't know. With the way you look, maybe you were just there for like a year each.
Oh, yeah.
Is that what happened?
Well, what happened was, I don't know, I believe we're born with a divine blueprint. And I came in with one that says, hey, you don't have to have your own children. Everybody's children is your children. Let's help create a better world for all of them. So that's been my life. So I'm grateful to be with you, and I've partnered with Aaron and so many other people here today to be change makers together with youth leading the way. So thank you, Amanda. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we're having this conversation, because you know that I believe in your message and what you're up to in the world, so much so that most of everyone here has worked on your content or business or website or many different things, because we all believe in what you're doing and want to see it move forward. So, but it all started a long, long time ago. In 2016, I believe you and I met. and you had this idea to write a book. Tell me about that idea. Like, you were already in the generative visionary space for this idea of this network. You already had a few components moving. But what was it that made you think, like, I need to get a book out?
Well, I think it has to do with my own journey of what I discovered in ways that would create an understanding with people and go, wow, yeah, I think I thought that too. You know what I mean? Our own lives have been kind of that precursor to our purpose, I think. And even though I've been a coach and a facilitator and have worked with a lot of people and fine tuning these things, you know, there's a difference between holding space for other people and being held in a way where my own story could come forward that could include other people. And I just had lots of ideas about it, post-it notes and journals, and you know, and it's a big picture. Like, well, how do we change the world with youth being in the driver's seat? You know what I mean? And there's a lot of people who are, you know, my own story brought that forward, like how I came to that idea. So I figured the story in the book could help others go, yeah, that makes sense. I have a story, and yeah, my kids are teaching me something every day. And oh yeah, maybe we could do school differently, you know, without me coming across like some expert going, you know, I have the solution. I feel the solutions are in the room, and my own story was going to be part of that being revealed, you know.
Yeah.
And I say that because, you know, from my experience of having been in higher education and running a nonprofit around transformative learning and working with a lot of PhDs, and you know, there's a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge, and it's just really great to be around them. And it's like the application of change is not so much about a head space, it's a heart space. And I figured if I could tell my story, people would feel my heart and maybe a little of my head space too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember the conversation. I remember, I think we met at World Domination Summit really briefly, and then we met up at a Panera to have a conversation later. And I just remember hearing you share this vision, which was just enormous. I mean, it I've worked with a lot of visionaries, and it was like, wow, you know, usually I'm trying to help people figure out, like, who is the first person that you need to talk to, right? Like, who's the first reader, who's the first audience. And there was no doing that with your message. It was like, we need to figure out how to talk to all of the audiences, because it is a message that needs everyone to come together and work together: the parents, the teachers, the, you know, community organizers, the entrepreneurs, the business professionals. Like, it literally had to be able to speak to everybody at
Right.
once and get them
Right.
all to opt in. So I
Yeah.
remember thinking, like, wow, how are we going to do this? This
Right.
is a big challenge. I've never had to do that before. And then, you know, you told this incredible story about something that happened at a self-designed learning community that you worked in. And that was kind of like the thing that allowed us to pull all of it together. You want to share a little bit of that story to just kind of give people, listeners, the context for
Oh,
what's
sure.
possible?
Sure. Yeah. Well, a little bit, you know, my just a snippet of my background. I was a high school English teacher out of Ohio, and I lasted about 6 years, and I literally burned out, you know, because I really did act as if I could help each student. I had 180 of them, be in the driver's seat of their learning. And I don't know where that idea came from, but I was looking for other people that would have that idea also. And I didn't see many of them in the school that I worked. So I left education, went into business, and was able to travel to 2 different domains and in many different states in the space of business development and marketing. And I was always when I would connect with people, I would always say, well, hey, how did you decide to be a doctor? Or why did you, to try to unravel how they chose their lives. And it was really interesting that most people that I talked to didn't really have an understanding that they had a divine mission that they were born with. They didn't know that because they were spending most of their time meeting other people's needs in order to be successful. So I kept looking and looking and looking. I felt like, Columbo on the, being the magical detective out there. I know there's other people out there that have these ideas. And it led me to different spaces like neurolinguistic programming and hypnotherapy and all kinds of spaces. And luckily for me, I met a gentleman who watched me receive an award for a company I work for. And I did on my little speech and I sat down and he leaned over to me and he goes, "This isn't your passion, is it?" I said, "No, is it that obvious?" He goes, "No, what are you really up to?" And I said, "Well, I think we need to get kids in the driver's seat of their lives so that more adults are passionately involved in their livelihood. That's what I think." He goes, "I've got someone you need to meet." So he introduced me to a gentleman. This event was happening in Florida. I flew back to California and I got connected with a gentleman he was mentioning named Brett Cameron out of Canada. And I called him up and I said, "Hey, I heard about you and what you're doing. And I really would love to learn more." And he goes, "Well, come on up, So literally, I'm thinking about all the times we've been at conferences and we meet people. And this one I really followed up with. And next thing I know, I found myself on an airplane going to Vancouver, British Columbia, and meeting with Brent and his family and seeing this learning community that he had started with his daughter, who, she was a little adult actually, and they were interviewing different schools. And she remembers sitting on a swing when she was about 5 or 6 years old. She goes, "Dad, I don't want to go in that building. If I do, I'll lose myself forever." So it was then that his Brent and his wife, Maureen, decided to create a learning community. And they actually wanted to do it with their daughter, Alana. And suddenly there was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, up to 12 to 14 young people that came together to create this learning community. It was called Wonder Tree. And they met in the basement of a church. And what was really cool about how they learned is that they weren't in desks and chairs and asking for permission. They were sitting on couches. There was blackboards. And this was in the early 90s, right? So we didn't really have internet and all kinds of stuff going on yet. And so I just watched them. They'd create their learning model or what they were curious about, what they learned over the weekend. And then there were like project maps that happened. And he just taught them all how to become project managers, managing their learning. And they actually managed the budget. And when the Macintosh computers started coming out in the early days, they got enamored with the HyperCard program, and they would program their learning. They would design their learning curriculum as a team about what they wanted to learn, and they would create these amazing projects and so forth. And they got written up in the newspaper for their uniqueness because they'd enter into different contests and stuff. And one day, BC Hydro, the big utility there, noticed what these kids were up to, and they had a big project they wanted to do, which was to design a game that taught energy conservation. And it was called Power Smart. And they thought, we were about ready to hire these consultants and probably pay them up to $200,000 or whatever. But this game is ultimately for kids, 7th and 8th graders. Why don't we go talk to these Wonder Tree kids? So now remember, these kids are 8 and 9 years old. And so here comes these suits, they're coming into the basement of the church, and they just, they're so professional. They kind of mapped out the whole project on Gantt charts and all kinds of stuff. Project management tools, right, are really wonderful. And these guys were so impressed, they ended up writing them a check for $75,000 to design the game. And I got to be a part of that project. So it was pretty exciting. And I started to see all the questions that I had been asking about learning for life was actually happening in this basement of the church. And these kids were so excited about learning. And that from there, they ended up creating their own company. Around 13 years old, they had their own company called Learningware Inc. And then at the time, BC Hydro rolled out the game. They wanted to then send it to other, states and provinces besides British Columbia. And they went back to the kids and go, what do you think we should do to get this out there? And he said, well, the kid said, well, you should contract with Renee Beth because she knows business, she knows school, she's worked with us. Let's do it. So I created a company called Metasource Network. And then I started marketing this as a turnkey game to other utilities in California. And we did some rollouts and it was really impressive. And I could never tell my clients, oh, my team is a group of 14-year-olds, learning where I could never tell them that. It didn't really matter. What mattered was we were designing something, it was intergenerational, it was building the bridge between business and education, and kids were in the driver's seat. So that sort of planted a seed for me, like, why don't we do more of this? Right.
Yeah.
So when I told you this story, you went, yeah, I think my son's going to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. I mean, you were telling me this story and I was like, oh my goodness, I am all of the stakeholders. I'm the mom who decided I'm not going to follow the norm. Like I'm gonna, do a lot of things that made a lot of people upset about parenting the way that I parented him. Right. And then, I was a teacher who also burned out, but as you were telling me about that learning environment, I was like, oh yeah, that's what I was trying to create. And I had a few moments in my teacher training where I designed events in the room, like events and experiences that were like so transformational, but I was in charge of those and I had to do so much work to get them in. And so the idea of like having them do it was like, oh my gosh, this absolutely has to get there. I'm an entrepreneur who, frankly, some of my best business ideas came from listening to my 5 and 6-year-old son. It was just like, oh, I have to help with this. I totally get this from all of the different perspectives. And I see how possible it is, how I've already kind of lived the model myself, connected him with other people in my community when he needed support with this or that, right? Like I had my own little experience of living the potential happening. So when I saw your vision, I was like, okay, how do we do this? How do we get this out there?
And that was such a saving grace for me, because unless you've had some awareness, there has to be, consciousness starts with awareness. You have to be aware. And you had the awareness from all those levels. And it was like, I think, again, it was a divine meeting that we met. And then, you probably have a few more questions related to what happened since then, right?
And that's why you call her the midwife, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's not only that, but reading Upside Down Mommy was like the whole butterfly metamorphosis. I'm going, yeah, butterflies are all over my house. This is the whole symbol that has been in my life around transformation. My work is about transformation on many levels, but meeting you and being held in a space where I knew I wasn't crazy for trying to do what I'm trying to do. You know what I mean? Just because people can't see the big picture and where the root cause issues are, I feel, in all of our society has to do with how are we educating our humans here on this planet? We're just it's a root cause problem. And I think it's becoming more apparent now. Let's see, I've been on this journey for I don't know, I hate to add it all, maybe close to 40 years, I think. So it's like when a vision has you, it's like different than having a vision. This vision is chosen me as a vehicle. And then you showed up and I went, okay, I think we can do something together here,
Yeah.
At least I'm not alone anymore.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too that you said that, like, at least people don't think not everyone thinks I'm crazy. Like that is when I wrote the dedication for the You Can't Make This Story Up book. That's one of the things that I put in there is like, I hope this helps you realize you're not really one of the crazy ones. You're one of the sane ones, right? Like, because that's what happens, right? We get these big, crazy visions and people just look at us like people who love us are terrified that we've lost it. you know, like,
Oh,
which I
yeah.
mean, that's a really nice vision, but I mean,
Oh, yeah. Like Mark, my partner, goes, now what planet did you say you came from? You know, it's kind of like he just accepts it now. You know, it's not like he's shocked anymore. But I do ask the questions that need to be asked. And, you know, I'm just grateful to be in this community where others are, you know, asking similar questions. Like,
mhm,
we're really going to be the change we want to see in the world. You know, here's the thing. It's like, why don't we do it together? As opposed to, you know, oh, or getting help in the personal growth and development space, spending thousands and thousands of dollars and working with lots of consultants that say my vision was too big. You need to pick a demographic. Who's your demographic? I go, well, my demographic are the kids. But you can't reach the kids unless you get through the parents and the teachers, you know, unless we find a group of kids that really can then become the spokespersons, you know, to help. I think people are getting ready now to like listen. Hey, these kids are inheriting a world that is not working, and we all have something to do about that. But it can't be a handout or a hand up. You know, it has to be a code-generated. Get off the what should I say? Small thinking. You know, expand the vision to include everyone. And so the old marketing tactics, and you laugh and chuckle, and I go, you know, these are the consultants what told me you can't do this, you can't do this is too big, and blah blah blah. So I had all that on one hand, and on the other hand, I had all the experts, the PhDs that were going, well, you need a PhD to be able to go. Well, I'm going to tell you, I think if my life doesn't turn into, I think on my gravestone, I want some sort of say, here's your PhD, you earned it. You know what I mean? As opposed to, you know, and this is not to be disrespectful to anyone who's gone the traditional route, but I think you have to find your way, and I'm traversing new ground.
mhm. Yeah. Well, and you know, I think that brings me to my next question, which is like, what were some of the challenges you faced as we got into the writing? Because you did hit right up against some of those
Yeah,
perceived barriers, let's say.
right, right. Well, we all have to admit we've been through the system, right? If
Mhm,
we're on this earth, and you know, if you've gone through the traditional education system, then you've been fed small bits of information over a long period of time. And some people are able to sort of find who they are along the way. And some don't, but yet they become experts in one specific domain, you know, as opposed to seeing the big picture and how they're all, to use a nature term, cross-pollinating for new system change. So I was in a couple of those domains, trying to shift the change in the domain. So I'm holding this space, a bigger space. So I did have some, you know, voices in my head that said, you really shouldn't be trying to put this message out until you get your PhD.
mm,
And quite honestly, I work with a lot of PhDs in the transformative learning community models that now is happening all around the world. Um, and I was in those conversations with people, and I noticed that I could participate fully. It wasn't like I was holding myself back because I didn't have, you know, 4 more years of education. I had a great idea, I'd share it, and people go, gosh, I never thought of it that way. It really didn't matter if I had a PhD or if I didn't have a PhD. But when I started to put it all together in a book that's going to go out there, you know, I thought I better get some research. I better document where these ideas are coming from, find other people who are credible, you know, to have, you know, research to support it, you know.
yeah.
So I remember coming to that, I don't know, was it the first retreat, the second? I can't
I think it's
remember.
your first one. Yeah.
Right. So I drove up to Mount Hood and had a bunch of resources in my trunk. And you had a lot to say about that. Do you remember?
I do. Because we had gotten this framework, and I had seen, you know, in talking with her, not just like the Wonder Tree story, but even digging into your own personal story and seeing how you were a living, breathing example of what you were trying to communicate. And so, of course, you know, anyone who's worked with me knows that I'm going to ask, like, how do we get your story into this? Because inevitably people are going to say like, wow, that's a great idea. Where'd that come from? So you might as well engage the story and figure out, how you're going to tell it the most powerfully. And so we had that all figured out. I was so excited to see you write your story. And then you showed up with a trunk full of books. And I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
The credibility gremlin got to you before I did. And so yeah, I remember watching you bring in stacks of books and just being like, nope, turn around and put those back in your car. And so she looked like a little kid. She like hung her head and she slumped them back up in your car. And I was trying to help her carry these stacks of books.
Well, I figured, like, see, you were the, in so many ways, it was like, I think it was feeding into that belief that I wasn't enough to actually bring the story forward. And, after really working, all of us, I think, have worked with people, and that's a common dilemma. People don't believe in themselves. They don't believe that they're enough. And it takes years and supportive community to overcome it. And so I guess that was a sign that I was still, even though I was courageous and taking it on, like, I'm going to allow this book to come through me. There was a part of me that was thinking, what if you're not ready? What if you're not enough? What if you do this wrong? I felt like a huge sense of responsibility, and I needed support, but I didn't know how to receive it yet. That you could hold me as being enough, that my own journey was enough. So that was a big aha. I'm grateful, so grateful for that gift.
Me too. I remember your face. That was a hard weekend because you were like, that's what ends up happening, right? Like, we have these great ideas. We don't realize that, yes, they're part of this divine blueprint, I think you called it, right? This, like, I would call it true intention that comes in, that is supposed to be unfolded. And yet, like, usually that got crushed somewhere. So here we are, we get this big vision, which part of the vision is us being at our potential, right? Like, if this vision, then I'm at my potential, I'm at my capacity, I'm doing all the things. But then we have to face the fact that a lot of our thoughts about what potential is and look like got co-opted essentially, right, by other people's thoughts of what that is. And so, you're definitely not alone. Everyone else here could probably say the same thing. Like, the process of writing really forces you to analyze those things. Like, you write something, you're like, no, that's not actually what I believe. That's what I'm fighting against.
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
But it came out of me. Dang it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm still,
right.
And that process is just such a refining. It's a refining fire is really what it is.
Exactly. Well, it's almost like coming home to oneself, discovering your authentic voice. It takes a lot of deprogramming in order to do that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. But that's the new world that the change makers are creating. It's like, just the word that you used, unfolding, the fact that you have the common vocabulary that I had, that we learn from the inside out, not the outside in. Exactly. I mean, the outside in is important, but inside out first. Who are you? Like, who is the learner, and what are we discovering, and how are we doing it? It's kind of like, you don't know who it is, and you're missing the whole point. That's why I feel right now we've got a great opportunity to help people come home to themselves authentically. So, and I think the youth can teach us best on how to do that if we give them space and time. Center stage.
Yeah. What were some of the other challenges? I mean, I remember those first few retreats that we did, and I remember, so many people who have these big visions like you get these ideas, but there's like no time to do it. It's like, this is a great idea, except, I mean, how many enterprises were you running when I met you? Like, When were you going to actually write a book? When was this going to happen?
Oh, yeah. Well, it was on the list, but it's almost like when you're, for me, I guess being an independent entrepreneur as a coach and a consultant, I would have my schedule and filling it with the, what my contributions needed to be for my clients. And then also running a nonprofit, I have been, yeah, which is a big responsibility. And running a board, and it's kind of like, who do I delegate that to? I can't delegate my client work, I can't delegate my board work. I was also an independent consultant with a major company in the health industry, and that was a leadership position that required additional time. And you know so by the time I fill out my schedule, it's like, okay, if I get up at 5 in the morning and I map my time and really schedule it, where do I fit myself in? And it was a challenge. I realized that I needed to reorganize a few things to live my purpose, which was quite ironic since I was teaching other people to live their purpose. And I felt like I was on my purpose with everything I was doing. However, there was something new that was wanting to be birthed, and I needed to create the space to do it. And I think working with you helped me realize that, more so than ever. It's kind of like, well, you got a midwife here that's going to help you. And now you're in gestation, you're about ready to, you can't like give this up. You have to move forward. So everything had to change. And I want to acknowledge all the mothers out there that know what I'm talking about. It's like your life takes on a new rhythm as a result of accepting that you are a vehicle for something to be birthed. And I accepted that, and things needed to change. And with that said, I'm still one of those people that, nature hates a void, right? Got a lot going on, and it's all connected. See, to me, I was like, it's all connected. So just like you, I go, I need to build my team. I need other people that want to work with this. So, you were the first person to see the big picture, and that I was being unreasonable with myself. Which was really another big lesson, because I kept thinking, I'm not doing enough. And you
Right.
kept going, I think you're being unreasonable.
Yeah.
So it's like, what's with this kind of, oxymoron, right?
Yeah, we had that. I think it was the second retreat where I was like, okay, enough of this. We need you to like write down all the things that you're doing, because remember, Lori, you were there, right? Like, it was like, I just can't do this, and I'm not doing enough, and I need to do more. And but sprinkled in that was the hundreds of millions of things that were being accomplished in the back end on all of these other things. So it was like, we had to make the list of like, what are all of the things, and what things can be released or delegated to so and so, so that you have time to breathe and eat and do.
I remember watching her go through that process on that retreat and just being amazed at all of the different balls that she was juggling, and wondering how she was going to get it all done. And it was so interesting the way you stepped in and helped her to see, that she was enough. And how, Renee Beth, do you remember at that retreat, that those points in times where it would click, and then you would kind of like fall back in, and I'm late, I'm this, I'm that. And then Amanda would step in again. It was almost like she'd pick up the pieces and put it back together and say, it's okay, sweetheart, you are enough. It was amazing. It was an amazing process to watch.
Yeah. Thanks for being there, Lori.
It was,
Yeah.
But to me, like, the writing of the book or the actual like doing of the project is the easy part. The hard part is getting yourself there. It's in all of those ways, like creating the time and the space when you are someone who, I love that you use the example of mothering and giving birth to something, because, how often do you hear moms whose kids go off to live their own lives, and then they've completely lost their sense of identity, right? Like, they've just been a mom, which I don't say that just as in lightly, like God bless them for devoting their entire life to that kid. And also, like, they're human too, with needs and desires and dreams. And so you use this metaphor, and I'm like, wow, that's really juicy, because it is true. That's kind of the same thing that happens with messengers, is you feel this calling, this life that's coming through you that feels in a lot of ways like more important than your own, right? Like, because you see, like, if this happens, then hundreds, thousands, millions of lives will change if I can do this. And yet it like wars against even our own potential and the parts of us that need to be nurtured and expressed and supported, in addition to doing that for this thing that's trying to come. It takes a life of its own, and we have to figure out how to be with it and not let it completely take over.
Yeah.
Like, I need a date night. I need a date night away from my business. Like,
Right.
it's just but I think that watching you over all of these years, the book got finished, and then it was time to start looking at, how do we get this message out there? How do we get people engaged? What are these wild projects that you had, inspired and you were talking to young people about, but like, how do we get movement around that? So I'd love for you to share a little bit about that process of, like, the book is complete and, little things are starting to happen,
Right.
but also, like, this is another birthing process. Like, the book was just the first of the triplets or whatever it's going to be, right?
Exactly. Well, it's again, it's like when you all birth your children, it's like, okay, you finally, the baby's born, and then the baby's here. And it's like, okay. For me, it was like the book was a calling card. I knew I could have gone for the, $1 million, whatever, millions bestseller, whatever you go through on Amazon and all that. But I felt like the most important aspect of this is the learning community aspect. And if I could create, the book was a calling card, and if that's so, what are people being called to, and how will we work together? So from that, and this is another interesting thing about you, Amanda, you're so multifaceted. I had been working with another consultant to help me design some courses. And because I knew, again, the book would be a catalyst, but it's to get the kids in the driver's seat of their lives. But you need to reach the parents, the grandparents, the teachers, So it meant I got to probably have some courses. And so here I was working with a course designer, not knowing that you also are a course designer.
Yeah.
So I spent, I learned a lot by working with someone who didn't understand my vision, who was an expert and was trying to help me design a great course, but who was disconnected to the mission of what it was I was trying to bring forward. So all of that went out the window when you told me that you were a course designer, and we started to integrate the natural organic learning model that came through. It's like learning is natural, just like an acorn. It unfolds when you plant it in fertile ground. We created the learning model that's now a 5-step program that's organic learning for life. It starts with trust, and then cultivation, and then cross-pollination, and then regenerative systems, and then the higher purpose, which we call the soul of technology, and how those things work together. My goal was, okay, in order to have learning communities happen, we're going to need people who can facilitate these conversations, where people can bring who they are to what they do. So the courses were to enroll facilitators, and who could then create their own pods, and I could duplicate myself, because I figured to be a real change agent, I better have a succession plan. There'll be people that will carry this on once I drop this body and move to another dimension, or whatever you want to call it, make the transition. And then have a youth advisor group that would be really helpful to lead. And then you and I put our heads together and we created the courses and we created a community. We brought Erin in. Erin, thank you. You're a lifesaver. Erin became my admin assistant. And then, and so I remember that we started looking at, well, how do we do an online community? And Erin checked out a couple and brought one to us. And, you know, now we have like 6 facilitators who are about ready to, you know, become official LTPN, Living the Potential Network facilitators. We've got a group of youth advisors now, 7 youth advisors. We've got a podcast, you know, we've got a new show coming forward. And we've got each of the facilitators has their own project. It's a practicum. And the goal is to, no matter where we are in learning, it's like when you can bring the essence of who you are to what you do and you have a community to support it, each one of them has a project that they're bringing forward that the Living the Potential Network will help promote and help grow more people learning, intergenerationally learning together. So I think that's the best way I could describe it. Did I leave out anything?
No, lots of seeds. It's like we've been planting all of these seeds for a really long time, right? It's like, and seeing some of them sprout and letting those unfold and being like, well, why aren't these working? Maybe we need to try something else. Maybe those seeds were duds. But
Oh yeah, in the midst of a pandemic too.
in the
you know.
midst of a pandemic. And, you know, I mean, there are some other things that you have been facing over the last few years looking at growing this, which, you know, we're talking about like the stories behind the stories of like, what is it that messengers really have to face off with in themselves, in the world, when they're, you know, bound and determined, like when the vision won't let you go. How do you navigate these hard moments? What are some of those for you?
Well, it's interesting it's helped me deepen my spiritual path in terms of realizing that I'm grateful that I feel guided and that it's not up to me to, you know, the sense of responsibility that I came in with being born the oldest of 2 in a family, pretty dysfunctional family. I felt like I had to be the one to make everything happen. So over the last time that we've been working together, I've learned to let go of that, you know, as much as I can, to trust that there's a divine hand supporting me. And so I've created a rhythm to my day where I start with gratitude and I do some meditation and some journaling and ask for help. And then I do my best to get out of the way. And sometimes when I don't do a very good job of that, what we call coyote medicine, you know, the coyote drops in and goes, take that, you know, like, remember I was planning those event they were going to do in Washington, D.C. And I suddenly was in an accident that, you know, created a major accident that created a concussion. And I had to just stop for a while and let go and let God. So yeah, now I look at it when there's interruptions, I look at it like, there's maybe I should just stop for a moment, take another look around, ask for help, get feedback, and adjust, as opposed to got to make this happen, you know, that driven visionary that sometimes, you know, the ego will take over. And I really would like to let go of that altogether. I think, Teddy, you wanted to ask me something back there. I don't know for sure.
Oh, we can't hear you, Teddy.
Jen,
Oh, now we can.
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say right before you mentioned something about the coyote, like you went from you had to do everything and you were this to be, and I'm like, wait a minute, there's a story there. I wanted to know what the story was. And then you went ahead and so there was an accident and you couldn't do what
Yeah.
you thought you needed to do. And
Right.
what was the gift in
Okay.
there?
Okay. Yeah. The gift was, I luckily, because I had a concussion, was able to go to one of my favorite doctors who does the emotional freedom technique, chiropractic, really deep guy, and meet with him a couple times a week, and so it really helped, I think, adjust my right left brain, get back into a new alignment, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. And I just started to realize, like, oh, that accident wasn't an accident. That was a synchronicity that sometimes when we're interrupted with what we think we need to do, there's something else coming through, and it's all perfect. It's all in divine order. So
Did that help you? Did that help you learn to, I don't know, delegate, or what was, how did you reset everything?
Yeah. Well, it's like my relationship with Amanda shifted to, she helped me with the book, she helped me with the course design and so forth. But then it was like, okay, we're collaborating at another level that has to do with operationally, culturally, the community that's emerging. And, we were able, instead of me feeling like I got to do this, she stepped in and held my hand and said, we can do this. So it was really helpful to accept that help, and to know that we were in an expansion space, that we, they say slow is the new fast. We're going through it again. We're readjusting a few things in preparation for 2022. So yeah, I think that's the big lesson. Would you say anything more about that?
Well,
Amanda?
I think it was just, this is why we had to have your chapter in You Can't Make This Story Up, because the convergence of all the things that were happening at that time was, you had this accident, but you also had an event that you had committed to and had people beginning to register for and excited about. And so it was like, okay, I've done it before where I've kind of stepped in because, when it's just a vision, it's just a vision, right? And like, it starts to get material, it starts to get on pages, it starts to get on PowerPoints, and it starts to get into experiences and events. And the more material it gets, the more hands we need to make that happen, because now we have to do things that we don't know how to do, like autoresponders, what? Right? Like registration page, how do I do that? What's it's like all these things started happening. And so, meanwhile, in the background, I'm listening to my son say, I'm not really excited about higher education. And I'm thinking that I really want to be in a space where I can be mentored and like try things out, just like see by experience where I want to spend my time in this life. And so, okay, I'm like listening to all the things and starting to connect the dots. Like, okay, we have someone who can do admin because he fixes all of my tech all the time. So I knew that he could do it or figure it out. And then, we started to need flyers and things like that. So we were asking Alyssa to kind of jump in and start helping with social media. And of course, she also jumped into the Youth Advisory Council, which was fun to watch these two do all of their aunt and nephew, more like sibling dynamic.
I think that was probably the first work scenario for me and Erin working together in a professional environment when we were professional about it. But that was really awesome to jump on board and start creating together. Yeah.
Yeah, we found other ways to tease each other outside of the council, it
We're
happened
like,
a few
ooh,
times
this could
in
be
it.
fun.
Yeah. Well, what's really cool is family-based learning, design. It's kind of cool because I think more families, one of my passions is, home-based learning, home-based working, ideas of families working and learning together from home. I think that's the future. I really do.
Wow.
And it's very exciting to see. And by holding that vision, a project has come our way. That's pretty immense. It could, it's happening in one state, but it could take off big time. Because of the pandemic, so much has been revealed about what's not working in school. And what could be happening, because learning is everywhere. It's not, it's kind of like what I love Erin's approach about what you want to do, Erin, in terms of maybe it's not higher education right now. You have this entrepreneurial streak, you've been reading books, you take on a project, you work with people. It's like, okay, so what else do you want to learn? And then who can teach you that? And, I don't think there's one program that could satisfy your curiosity right now. Am I right about that, or am I right about that?
You're definitely right about that.
Yeah, and I feel so comfortable. And this is the thing where you say wisdom knows no age, because there's a difference in, age. We assume that because people have lived on the planet longer, they have more wisdom. Well, that's not necessarily so. As a matter of fact, most of the youth that have been through our programs, because our intergenerational courses, Erin's been through several of them, and the youngest is 17 and the oldest is 70, right? In our courses. And the youth, what do the youth walk away from? Mostly they're thinking, gosh, I don't have that baggage. I'm so grateful I don't have that baggage that I have to release. And it's inspiring for the adults, the older beings to say, you know what, I get to let go. I want to learn and have fun doing it. So there's a lot of dynamics that are happening here. Really.
I just want to, I had chills. So I want to go back a little bit, just a little bit, because that is so powerful. Makes me want to cry. So you're trying to get all this done. You have an accident and you can't do it, which forces the issue to ask for help. And you didn't just get help, you got help from a family system that actually created like what you were trying to create.
Yeah, exactly. Just can't make this stuff up.
You can't make that up.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
The really funny part of that is that I've worked with team members for 10 years at different points as needed, pull these people on and this type of thing. And so, Alyssa was in a place where she was like, I'm ready to do more. How can I help your clients? And Erin was like, I want to be entrepreneurial. And so I'm like, hey, this is the perfect scenario. Look, it's Renee Beth and it's about youth. And it's like this perfect, beautiful alignment for Renee Beth. And then I look up one day and I get asked to expand my vision. I'm like, I have no idea how I'm going to do this by myself. And my coach goes, you're not doing anything by yourself right now. Like, you're running a team for someone else. Why don't you just ask that team to help you with your stuff?
Ding, 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 ding. Well, I'm glad I could be, a catalyst for social, you want to be a catalyst for social change. So let's start with one family at a time.
Right? Yeah. And it's all happening. I love, as a mom, I get to hear the excitement happening through the walls as Erin's working on this big project. And the amazing thing is that, and this is the part that I think is really important for
that we're getting along.
Listeners. Well, the getting along part is really important too. But also this piece of like, when a vision is this big, it's easy to look at the end game and be frustrated that right now doesn't look like the end game. You know what I mean? Like but the impact is supposed to be like, I see what this is going to turn into. And the distance between that and where things are right now in the build can be so upsetting, infuriating, grief-stricken. I don't know, insert the word, right? Like it depends on the day and what you're dealing with. But to see that, like, in order to get to that end vision, the little that has to be done on the micro first. And so you had to figure that out for yourself. You had to figure out how to trust yourself a little bit more. You had to figure out where is the fertile ground that I'm going to plant these seeds. You had to figure out, how am I going to work with these other people and domains and delegate and make this happen? And how do I set up systems so I don't lose my mind and leverage technology that I don't know how to use? Erin, can you help? You know, like, you've done all of these things for yourself, but in the process of doing that, it's happening for all of the people connected to the organization. And it's not always looking the way that we imagine it will look, but it's really cool to see the what do they call those, fractals, right? Like,
Right.
there are fractals happening. It's happening in you, it's happening in, you know, in the team, it's happening. And now you have this huge project in New Mexico. Are you wanting to share some of that at this point?
Sure. New Mexico, I don't know if any of you have been there, but it's a beautiful state. I think it's the 5th largest in land mass, but it has only 2 million people in the whole state. And there's a big issue with connectivity. There's like broadband issues because a lot of people are remote, and there's over 23 different native tribes that live in New Mexico, and each one of them has their own language. And then so the culture of New Mexico is really interesting. There's Latino, what should I say, Latin American, what they call themselves Hispanics, and then there's Mexicans, and then there's the different tribes, and then there's the Anglos, and a lot of very wealthy Anglos are moving to Santa Fe to retire. So it's pretty obvious of the haves and the have-nots. And then when the pandemic hit, it became really obvious that when school was not in session, there were people that had no access to internet, no way to access the learning whatsoever. And the ones that could, you know, like we've seen also in other states, like the parents are now looking at what the kids are learning and they're going, no wonder you're bored. You know, I would be bored too. So it's kind of like the issue came to a head when 23 school districts, I think there's over 89 school districts plus a little more, it's close to 110, 120 when you include the charter schools throughout all of New Mexico, but 23 of them sued the state. It was called the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit, and they demanded that there be equity in technology for all families. So the court ruled that the state must deliver services to these families. So the challenge is, it's not like calling up Comcast and saying, go lay fiber. It's like when you look at the mountains and the Rocky Mountain, I mean, it's a very expansive area. So it's like, where would you start? So there was a big contract that I'm working with a company named Next Ready, and a gentleman by the name of Ferdy Serum, who's a genius in his own right, and who's been there and knows people. And it just seems like that presentation that we were able to put together, the state has now awarded for us to work with a pilot project of choosing about 5 different districts and helping them with these data casting units. That's kind of like having your own private cable TV channel that works with a public broadcasting system in each home that's then connected to a hotspot. Now, this isn't broadband, but it's a way of seeing what technology is possible to work. And then it helps determine where broadband could go. But we're not just focusing on the technology, we're focusing on the relationships. And the whole concept is family-based learning. This is when it goes back to, you can't make this stuff up. family-based learning where the youth are in the driver's seat, and sometimes the youth speak English and their parents, are speaking Spanish or their native language. And there's some software and tools where they can learn together regardless of their language. And we can test out the band, what's working with what technology, but also what's happening. And we've created a community of practice, a online learning community that's similar to what we have been doing for the Living the Potential courses. And it's really interesting where I just spent like 8 or 9 days in New Mexico traveling to meet the different districts. And we're starting with the Taos School District, which I'm really excited to work with them. They're very, what should I say, aware of learning from the story perspective of who are our natives, what is their wisdom, how do we connect to nature, what does technology have to do with it? It's almost like the organic learning model of the potential with technology, with a school district that they actually have a director of Indian programs, and I've got Native heritage in me, and so the opportunity has been to, what is the wisdom of the Native elders that has not been heard? And how are they learning with their grandchildren? And what does technology have to do with it? So what stories we're going to be putting on these receivers? They're going to be videos and recordings and things that the families are doing. They'll provide a test for what the technology companies need to do to make sure the broadband gets to these places. So we're solving a couple of different problems, and sort of aligns with the organic learning model and the higher purpose of technology with family-based learning. I predict that the future will be family-based learning. The schools will become centers for plays and activities and things like that. But yeah, so pretty exciting to be out with this, because as we figure this out, the pilot program will then go into a larger program that will roll out statewide, and I guess there's 42,000 families that need support. So Erin has really been instrumental in working on we're moving with the platform that we did have, but we needed to go to a new platform that has scalability to handle a project of this size, and then could also scale to probably other states. And so if you're listening to this and you realize, hey, we need better technology, or we want to know about learning from home and what does technology have to do with it, we might be a good contact for you to figure that out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, that's just another way that I'm seeing the Living the Potential framework living, and being embodied is even through this process, to watch, all of these different companies and organizations that have very specific expertise and experience coming together and trying to figure out, how do we cross-pollinate, like what is the common language,
Right, exactly.
How do we get things done? And then to even see some of the mentoring that is going on in order to make this happen, with Erin having someone who just showed up in your community, and who happens to be interested in helping with culture, but has a background in technology. Like, you really can't make this stuff up.
I know. It's like, yeah.
This is the prototype. This is the thing. It's happening. And
yeah,
and it's just
really cool. Yeah, it couldn't happen at a better time. I mean, because people keep thinking we're going to get back to normal. I don't think there's a normal to get back to. I really don't. So we get to, and being a group of change makers, right? That's what we are. It's like, well, we can figure this out. How about we get the kids in the driver's seat? And that's part of what this whole program is. It's like, you put yourself in a position of teachers today, they're struggling, because the system hasn't been user-friendly for a long time. But now the pandemic has made it even worse. And the parents are going, well, what are we supposed to do about it? And there's a leadership aspect that's emerging here. Mm-hmm. And I think the change makers and the companies, Erin's really been interfacing with there's 7 companies that are participating in this model for the pilot project. And it is kind of interesting to see each role, and we've never done this together as a collective. So We have to trust, right? We have to cultivate. And you're holding such an important role there. Modeling what I go, hey, what if we get the kids and the youth in the driver's seat and there you are? It's already happening.
I have a question. Because you mentioned cross pollination and Amanda mentioned it. And then you were just talking about Aaron being mentored by someone from your team. So I'm putting it together in my mind. I'm not sure, but you're creating a space for business people and youth to interact, be mentored for, can you just like put words to it? Because I'm struggling to put words to that, but what are you
Sure.
doing?
Yeah. Well, you know how bees are the great pollinators in nature, right? And they work with the flowers and they create something, honey, right? And so forth. So the cross pollination, my vision was, what if we could have youth determine what they want to create and find mentors to support them in doing that? And it could be business meets education, it could be healthcare meets education, because we really have to teach people how to take better care of themselves. Because most of our society, goes to the doctor when they have a problem, but they don't know how to be proactive to not have the problem to begin with, right? So imagine if education was cross-pollinated with wellness strategies, right? So what if art was cross-pollinated with mental health issues? What if food issues were cross-pollinated with social justice issues, And in the project we're working with, Erin, you're cross-pollinating. You want to say anything about how you're cross-pollinating in your solutions that you're doing with the project so far?
Sure. I think the biggest way that's happening is like kind of because there's a lot of stakeholders in this project. You kind of gotta, cross-pollination is all about, I think, communication. I think that's probably one of the biggest pieces. It's making sure that all of our pieces align with each other and that we're all moving toward obviously that same goal with tinier manageable tasks, right? And I think I'll give you an example, sort of, we kind of have to right now kind of coordinate our data and how we're collecting it, because that's a big part of the program. And so everyone who's involved with different tools that we're using to support these families, whether it be our community that we're building, like Built That platform, or another project management tool that we're collaborating with another company over there, and then a data company, we all have to make sure that we're collecting data in the same way and that we're sharing it, and that we're collaborating on how can we best effectively use it and distribute it, obviously collect it and everything like that. And there's smaller bits in there, if you want to get really granular, but that kind of thing is just with such a big program, that's what's happening pretty much on a daily.
Right. So the other way of looking at cross-pollination, because Erin and Onyx, who's on our team, is behind the scenes making all this work so that when people show up into the community of practice and grandparents are meeting, let's say a teacher that's their grandchild's favorite teacher, and they're in a conversation around, what did I learn today with these tools? It could be a literacy tool. So we're combining literacy, family-based reading programs and literacy with the power of technology in the home. And it's like, what happens when a family gives up 30 minutes of TV a week and they learn together something? Then they tell us a story about it. So that in itself is a cross-pollination that would not normally happen without this project. So Erin's working on, how do we pull all these tools together so those stories can be told? And at the same time, they're going to be youth going, you know what? Ultimately, there's going to be like a recipe book of, here's best practices of what we discovered with these data casting receivers in the home that we didn't know before. We didn't know this about ourselves. We didn't know this about each other. This is what we're learning. This is what I love about learning. These are the projects I want. These are the people I've met. Here's the projects I want to do next. Suddenly it opens up this whole 21st century thinking skill set where people are using critical thinking, they're collaborating, they're problem solving, they're making connections, they're learning how to be in the driver's seat of self-directed learning. It's all happening while we're working together to solve this problem that there's not enough connectivity with technology. But it's not just about the technology, it's about the people and what are we learning when we have the connection, right? Which
Yeah.
is a little bit different.
Which I think is part of, you mentioned Ferdy, like it's part of his genius, right? Because he could have designed a solution that was just going to create connectivity, technology connectivity. But then you have kids who are connected, but don't know how to learn, don't have anyone to learn with, aren't really inspired, don't even know how to be curious because school was kind of feeding them what they needed, right? And asking. And so they don't know how to just like be with learning. And so his idea to make those connections between the technology and the health situation and the with the specific needs of the indigenous population and the community of learning, like he's connecting all of those dots into one place to create a solution that is way beyond what I'm sure any of those folks who made the judgment and granted the money imagined could happen, right? They were just like, we're going to get them access. And it's so much more than access because you had someone who could see how all of these things were connected and pull them together and into a solution that really should have been the solution to begin with. It should have been, how do we get these kids to actually love learning again?
Exactly.
So
Not
are
just
you
get
saying
access.
there's adults and kids and business people and parents and all these people are working on this project? Is that what I'm hearing?
Right, yeah.
Wow.
And more.
And
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really interesting to see how, what I'm really excited about is watching the youth be supported. Because sometimes they're split, like you come home and you've got to do all this stuff and there's no time for homework and the teachers are going, what's going on at home? You know, it's kind of like, let's meet the needs of the youth. Let's do that together. It's not the school's job to manage social change for people. And the parents are overwhelmed right now. So, and the youth are going, well, you know, what's the point? So the idea of helping them see like their thoughts, their ideas, their opinions matter, that there's no hierarchy here. So when people come into this learning community, it's not like your teacher is telling you what to do. The teacher's learning with you, the ones that want to be there. And the parents aren't like fearful that I don't know enough and I'm intimidated by the teacher. It's like, wait a second, we don't know how to solve this problem, but we're doing it together. And you know what? The youth have some ideas. Let's listen to them because they probably have a lot to say that hasn't been heard up until now. So it's going to be
What
exciting
a novel
to
idea.
see. Yeah,
What a novel
exactly.
idea. That's like-
Exactly. Exactly. Like you can't make this stuff up, right? It's kind of like we didn't know when. I knew at some point we would find the stakeholders who care about this. And when I labeled the fifth element of the organic learning model, the soul of technology, people go, what? The soul of technology? Does technology have a soul? Well, what if there's a higher purpose? What if that higher purpose is to awaken us to our purpose? And what if that becomes more understood of the connection that we're all one anyway? There's no big separation, and that whole thing is a big myth anyway. So what if technology brings that awareness to people? You know, I was thinking that, and here's a program. You can't make this stuff up.
No.
That is
No.
really amazing. I just have to say that's like I'm sitting here just with chills constantly because that is on the back scene. I was at that retreat. You knew me as Tammy. I sang Lila Hum. Anyways, I came down the stairs singing Lila Hum. You remember
Right,
that?
I remember.
Okay.
And I
So-
said, I'll have what she's having.
So I remember your frustration. I was tickled because I turned to him and I said, she's the me at this retreat. Like I was the one at my first retreat. I was the one that was all upside down. And you were having a time, but I was hearing that you were busy, and I was hearing that you were doing it all by yourself, and that it was really overwhelming. I could feel your overwhelm. And then on the other hand, I've had been with Amanda for 10, 11 years now. And it was like, I have heard that at different years ago in the beginning, the overwhelm, everything she was doing by herself and trying to do by herself. And I'm sitting here going, this is gosh darn amazing that, you know, the story collision where you guys come together, and then, oh my gosh, like expansion. And who would have thought that was January 2019? That's only been what, 2.5 years ago. And look at where you are and what's happening. It's amazing, Renee Beth. I am like,
I'm just blown
my
away.
hat's off to you. And then just that Amanda, this team coming together. I mean, you've always had a team on the back end for different things there was no way you could do. That wasn't your expertise. But I mean, now, like, yes, I mean, I just feel so blessed to be able to witness this, that the story behind the story, you know, is amazing.
Yeah.
It's really amazing.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you.
It has been great to watch from that retreat until now. And just all of the different ways it has grown. And I love that the children are involved. I love that the parents are involved. I love that it's creating community. Renee Beth, you have done an amazing job. I just hats off. It's been fun to watch.
Yeah, thank you. I couldn't do it without this amazing team. And the people stepping up, you know, in the perfect timing about all. So
Well, I'm sure that people are going to want to learn more about all the details and figure out how to learn more and plug themselves in. So you want to share how they should contact you?
oh, sure. Well, first you want to get the book. You can't make this stuff up.
Yeah.
You definitely want to get that book. Really read the story. And then you can go to my website, livingthepotential.com. And you can follow me on Facebook, Living the Potential, or Instagram, and let's see, LinkedIn. And we'd love to hear from you, because if you want to be a part of an intergenerational change maker network, we're looking for people that want to be a part of this, because, you know, the world is in the midst of a big shift. We're making history, and you might have a strength, a talent, a skill. You might have youth at home that are bored and you're trying to figure out, what can I do? Well, reach out to us, and we'll find a way. We've got some youth advisors that have some great ideas as well. So, and we have a potluck every month, a Saturday. A potluck is when we get together and we share interesting ideas for the changes we want to make, and we build community. So it's usually on Saturdays, first Saturday of the month. And you can find all those details at livingthepotential.com.
Perfect. Thank you, Renee Beth, for inviting me to be part of this amazing vision. And I know it hasn't been easy, because I have had the privilege of being on the inside during all of the messy breakdowns and all of the glorious breakthroughs. And I just want to acknowledge you for sticking to it when other people would have been like, you know what, this is too freaking hard. I need a break. You have just continued on, and I really want to acknowledge you for that.
Thank you. Thanks for being there.
Yeah.
It's the chrysalis. It's like, if you think about the chrysalis and what happens, you know, when a caterpillar goes into becoming a butterfly, it goes through a messy chrysalis, and then out of that is so worth it, you know. So I don't feel like I have a choice other than to keep creating spaces for this to happen in. And I know it's just sort of interesting, Amanda, that the perfect solution shows up when we're really clear about what we want. So thank you. You're just continue to be the perfect collaborative partner. And I appreciate all of your team, and Alyssa and Lori and Aaron and Teddy are just amazing people, and look forward to learning and growing with all of you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you all so much, you listeners, for listening to this episode of Sips of Story Insanity. If you like what you heard, please consider subscribing, leaving us a review, and maybe even sharing your own "you can't make this story up" moment, or for the sake of this episode, your own getting into the driver's seat of your own life moment. You can also find more details about that book we were talking about, You Can't Make This Story Up, What If It's All Happening for Us, at truetointention.com. That's it for today. Thank you. See you next time.